Greetings and welcome to Phantom's Edge. This will be Chapter 8 of this reading. After reaching Mongolma, Kaio and Thomas were escorted to the Emperor's palace by only a single guard. Once they reached the front door, the guard left to help tend to both of the Kanai's vessels, leaving the two pirates to speak with Emperor Phytogras. Kaio was best friends with the Emperor, having gained the Lepore's trust from saving a supply ship from being taken by both the Totalitarians and the bureaucracy. Ever since then, the pirate has been an honored guest and most gracious friend to the Lepore Empire. Welcoming his two friends, Phytogras stood from his throne and walked over to the pirates with open arms and a bright smile as he said, "Welcome, my friends." The pirate and Emperor gave a quick hug. Then the Lepore turned to the Rodeno boy to lift the child off the ground with a bear hug. Afterwards, Phytogras immediately let go of the boy, letting him drop to the floor, while the Lepore looked over at Kaio and asked, "Glorious friend, what brings you here?" "Well now, your majesty, Oh please, no formalities, good sir. You and I are equals while in my humble abode." Just as the boy stood himself up, Kaio said, "Yes, well." The pirate clapped his hands together once, yet pointed his index fingers to the Emperor, and continued, "I need to ask of you a favor." Phytogras swung his arms out and happily said, "Sure thing, my friend." Kaio lowered his arms, placing his right hand on Thomas's back, while he said, "I need you to help make a few special blades for the boy here." The Emperor lowered his arms, while becoming slightly disappointed as he said, "Oh my, that's a difficult request there, Kaio. Most people are not skilled when using such great weaponry, yet those that are will never keep the weapons for themselves." "I know." The pirate wandered away to stand at the edge of the large room, then turned to face his friend as he continued, "That's why I'm going to have the boy here prove he can handle himself, both in a fight and in keeping your little secret." Phytogras glanced at the Rodeno, confused, then looked back at the Kanai and said, "He is but a child, Kaio." "Not anymore, he's not. I made sure of that." "How so?" Phytogras looked over at the Rodeno boy and asked, "What have you done to prove yourself a man, rodent?" Sadly, Thomas could only shrug his shoulders, unsure of what was going on or why the Kanai thought about him in such a way. The Emperor looked back at the man and said, "Even so, he has no weapon." Kaio examined the boy, then quietly said, "Oh yes, that's right." He looked around the room, trying to find a weapon, then took one from a guard nearby. He tossed it over to Thomas and said, "There you go." The boy grabbed the item and examined it as he said, "But this is..." He then looked back at Kaio and continued, "This is a rifle. And... are you seriously insane?" "Yes. No. Maybe?" Kaio waved his right hand for a second towards the boy as he said, "Quit your jibber-jabber and prove yourself. I only get one favor." Oddly enough, the Emperor understood his friend's method and took one of his own swords from his back, readying it against the child as he said, "All right then, prepare yourself, boy." Unfortunately, Thomas could not ready himself before the Emperor tried to strike with a downward swing of Kekai. The Rodeno boy quickly moved to dodge the attack, tossing the rifle aside from him, thinking it was useless against the broadsword weapons the Lepore had. For a moment, the battle was only of Thomas trying not to be hit with Phytogras' one weapon. Then the Emperor went to use both swords at the same time, one in each hand. Amazingly, the Lepore was faster and more devastating with his attacks, breaking apart the ground every time he struck it instead of hitting the Rodeno. Thomas was barely able to avoid the strikes given once Kokai was being used, yet the boy was still able to focus and keep himself at a distance. With a dual stab from the Emperor, the boy dodged and ran over to where he dropped the rifle. He thought to turn back to face his opponent, but his eyes caught something hanging on the wall near the throne. It was a sword, equal to that of Kekai and Kokai, but seemed to be very old and rusted as it hung sideways with one edge of the blade aimed to the floor. The Rodania looked back to see the Emperor pull out his weapons from the floor. Then both turned to face each other as the boy kicked up the rifle with his right foot to grasp it. As Thomas tried to back away from the Emperor, Kaio called out, "Come on, boy! Show your manliness! You sure did with Kitty!" "Oh, please, Kaio," the Empress said as she looked over at the pirate with a smile. "Give the child a break." She then stood up to calmly head out of the room, while she continued, "I'll go make us some tea." Thomas went to dodging the two broadswords once more, trying to near the one on the wall for a shot, while Kaio said, "I'd prefer scotch if you wouldn't mind." "No alcohol in this household, Kaio. You know that." The pirate turned his head to his right with a jerk and barked, "Down!" The Rodania and Lepore neared the empty thrones. Then the boy jumped to land on one of the blades as it swung by and kicked off it. He flipped back and aimed the rifle with just his left arm, upside down, and fired a single shot towards the displayed weapon. With as powerful as the rifle was, being Lepore craftsmanship, the mounted sword bounced off the wall and was released from the hooks that held it up, falling towards where the Rodania was to land. The rifle slipped out of the boy's hand after he pulled the trigger. Then he went to stand in between the two thrones. He quickly raised his right hand above his head to grasp the sword's hilt. Then, with the blade still above him, he rushed towards the Emperor and swung down, only to bat away the first one from Phytograss's hand. Shortly afterwards, the boy jumped and kicked the second weapon out of the Emperor's other hand, while using his sword to push himself over the Emperor in a front flip. Thomas landed behind the Lepore, kneeling over his left leg, and swung the heavy broadsword he took to press the tip against the Emperor's upper back. Thomas held the sword's hilt backhanded with his right hand, while having his left at the base of it and ready to push the blade into the Lepore's body. Knowing he had lost against the Rodania, Phytograss laughed for a moment, then looked over his left shoulder at the boy and said, "Very impressive. No one's been able to match my speed with that blade since my father's passing over 20 years ago. Quite astounding for a small rodent such as yourself, boy." After a few seconds, the Emperor noticed the child was barely able to hold up the weapon in hand, starting to become fatigued by the blade's immense weight. Phytograss turned and grasped the blade with his right hand, relieving the boy of his pain as the Emperor said, "That's enough, child. You've proven your skills." Thomas let go of the weapon and fell forward, panting from his exhaustion, as the Lepore continued, "Now, we shall see about your own worth." The Emperor went to hang his relic back on the wall, while Kaio motioned to check on the boy. The Kanai bent over as he looked into the boy's unfocused gaze at the wall to his left, while Kaio said, "I think he likes you." Thomas turned his eyes towards the man, still trying to recover, with the Kanai flaring his right side fang for a second, as if dissatisfied. He then stood up straight as he watched the Emperor walk over and said, "I'll be off to tend my ships, my good friend." "So long, my friend," Phytograss said. "I hope to see you once more." Thomas finally moved to sit up as Kaio left the palace. Then the Empress walked over with a tray of drinks to ease the fighters. Phytograss sat down next to the boy as his Empress bent herself forward slightly to offer the drinks. Then she turned back to head out of the room once more, as the two warriors sat and sipped their tea. A minute passed, then Phytograss looked over at the Rodania boy and said, "I'm sorry, rodent, but I can't help you." Thomas almost coughed up his drink, turning to the Emperor as the Lepore continued, "Your captain is nothing but a nuisance to me. I have no choice but to end him at his current rate of life." "What? Why? I thought you two were friends." "Unfortunately, that is not the case. I lost a large shipment of supplies not too long ago, the men on that ship able to return to me with a report. One of them stated he saw a coyote wielding two swords commanding a ship that sailed to thwart their movement. Another noticed a pirate banner and the words "Wild One" etched at the stern of the ship. I believe Kaio and his crew have stolen my supplies." Thomas stood up, tossing his cup aside, and yelled, "That's a lie! I've been with Captain Kaio my whole life, and neither he nor his crew did such a thing to one of your ships. Fadagras calmly placed his cup on the floor, then stood up to face the boy as he said, "Really? Then tell me, rodent, did you witness the event that took place against my cargo?" The Rodeno boy looked down, pondering about the question, as the Emperor continued, "Do you ever witness those kinds of events?" "Well, sometimes. Not always. I'm usually helping my mother below deck." Fadagras gently placed his right hand on the boy's left shoulder, while he said, "Don't worry." Thomas looked up at the Lepore, slightly surprised, as he continued, "I can save you from his careless and reckless behavior. I can make you the most powerful soldier in all the lands, second only to me. All you have to do is one small favor." The Emperor leaned forwards, while gripping the boy's shirt slightly, and quietly said, "Bring the dual-edged demon back here, so that I may end his insanity. With him gone, I can rule without any more troublesome fighters." Thomas instantly became fearful, bending his ears back as his eyes widened. He was about to say something, but stopped as Fadagras said, "If you don't bring him here, or betray me, I'll end your life as well." He shoved the boy aside as he straightened himself up and said, "Now get going, rodent." In his fright of the Emperor, Thomas ran out of the palace and towards the docks to meet back up with his captain. While watching him leave, the Empress walked over to her husband and said, "You didn't have to be so harsh, sire." "I know, but it'll be fun to see how he handles the situation." The Empress looked over at her Emperor and asked, "What if he doesn't return?" "Never you mind, my love." Thomas ran as fast as he could to reach the vessels, where he treaded onto the Wild One and turned to Kaio as he called out, "Captain!" However, just as he did, he stood to find that the pirate had his arms wrapped around someone that the boy knew well. Kaio was holding Martha in his arms, speaking to her as if they were in love. The two motioned for the captain's quarters, while another pirate to Thomas's left asked, "What is it you want, boy?" Thomas looked over to find someone who he didn't recognize as a crew member, yet didn't seem to be of the Lepore Empire, even with him being a jackrabbit. After standing in silence for a moment, the person said, "Speak up, boy. If you want to talk to the captain, you'll have to wait. He's busy right now." The boy turned to the person, but glanced down at the floor to ponder about what to say, then looked back up and responded, I need to inform my captain of something." "Really? What's that?" Thomas stood quiet for a second, then replied, "He left something important back at the palace, and I can't carry it on my own. It's the special equipment he asked for, and it'll be easier for him and I to handle it, rather than anyone else." The Lepore thought about what the boy said, staring at the Rodeno with untrustworthy eyes, yet the pirate slowly motioned towards the captain's quarters. The man knocked on the door, then spoke to Kaio of the situation. The Kanai walked out and headed over to Thomas, with the Lepore following. Watching the scene, Thomas thought, how could he? He swore his heart to Jacqueline. He promised he'd never harm another pirate ship or allies of us. But there were short times I've seen his cannons sink one of ours or unmarked ships. Even all that, I never figured he'd touch my mother. Well, I'll show him to betray me. Once near, the pirate said, "All right then, let's go, my boy." Kaio and Thomas headed back to the palace, yet the Lepore stayed behind to watch over the two pirate ships. As he stood at the portside edge of the Wild One, seeing the two captains wander off, Martha walked over and asked, "Well, did it work?" "I believe so." "I don't like tricking my son, sir. It's not right." "It's for a good cause, ma'am. Don't worry. He'll be informed once he's back at the palace." Martha turned to walk away from the unarmored Lepore soldier as she said, Very well then. Thomas led Kyle back into the throne room, where no one, not even the guards, were present. Thomas moved to stand in the center of the room, while Kyle slowly continued to motion for the empty thrones as he glanced about to find nobody around. The Kanai stopped about 8 feet away from the Rodania and turned to face the child as he asked, "Kind of spooky, eh?" Laughter came from within the room, but not from either Thomas or Kyle. The Kanai glanced around to figure out where the voice was coming from, yet the Rodania boy just stood and stared at his former captain in anger. When the laughter stopped, with Kyle still looking for another person, Phytograph's voice broke in and said, "Good work, rodent." The Emperor appeared from behind his throne. His 2 swords hung on his back once more, and motioned towards the pirates. Kyle turned around to face the Laporte, while the Emperor continued, "Now, demon, answer me. What happened to my shipment 3 weeks ago?" Kyle put his feet together, while raising his left hand to press the tips of his fingers on his chest as he happily replied, "Well, I thought you'd never." The pirate lowered his hand to simultaneously use it with his other in several weird hand gestures, and continued, "You see, after having walked down to the docks, I realized that I had missed something and thought about how to get it. I then figured I could use a certain someone to get what I wanted, while also figuring it would bring me back here, just so that I could annoy you more." Thomas became confused as to what the man had said, only to realize that he was just talking about what had already happened. He looked over at the Emperor, who only had a blank stare at the Kanai even after the explanation. However, a moment passed, and the Laporte couldn't hold it any longer. Phytogras began laughing out loud as he bent forwards a bit. Then he straightened up and looked back at the pirate and said, "Damn you, Kyle. You couldn't think of something else to say?" Kyle smiled as he gave a friendly slap with his left hand on Laporte's right shoulder, while he said, "Better than the moronic excuse you gave my boy here to bring me back." Both went to laugh, while Thomas just stood completely baffled by the situation. He then broke the 2 away from their joy when the boy barked, "If this is your guys' means of a joke, then why'd you involve my mother?" Kyle turned to the boy as he said, "Sorry, my boy. Didn't mean to upset you. Didn't really know what it would take for you to supposedly betray me." "But why?" "Never you mind." Kyle moved to stand behind Thomas as he placed his hands on the boy's shoulders. Then he said, "For whatever reason you brought me back up here. That is why you've gained my friend's trust. You're a true pirate. Therefore..." The Kanai raised his left hand as a means to point at the Emperor, who then said, "Therefore, I can entrust you with these." He reached behind himself to reveal 2 double-edged blades, nearly exactly the same as the ones on the Laporte's back, but quite smaller. He handed them to the Rodania as he said, "I saw you coming a long ways, rodent. I had created these blades far before you and I ever met. I knew that you, who stood side by side with my best friend, would be the first and possibly only one that I ever hand down my kingdom's weaponry to. These 2 swords are just as powerful as my own, Kekai and Kokai, built for greater speed and those who are lesser in strength, such as yourself." Thomas was awestruck by the weapons as he reached for them. Then, while examining them closely, Kyle looked back at his friend and asked, "Why did you want me back here?" The Emperor turned his attention to the man and asked, "Do you still have no leads on who took my supplies?" "Sadly enough, no. But I have a sneaking suspicion that it was someone from Emmerich's Toltanian party." "Well, it's still not looking good for you, Kyle." "Well, excusez-moi, but it was not I, having said that for the 100th time. I may be that of a pirate, but I would never take from my friends, especially from one such as yourself, powerful and well outmatching me in both strength and numbers." Phytogras turned away to head for his throne as he said, All right. As he moved to sit down, the Emperor said, "To redeem yourself, Captain Kaio, please make sure that no one knows of the materials it takes to make my weaponry. I know the bureaucracy has some form of information about it, yet I'm not sure if they've used it or have let their knowledge of it slip into outer hands." "Will do." Thomas took his new swords and strapped them both to his left side, then bowed to the Emperor as he said, "Thank you, Your Majesty. I shall not show dishonor towards you, as my captain before me." Kyle glanced down at the boy with a smile, then looked back up at the Lepore as he said, "We'll be off then, Your Highness." The Empress entered the room once more and sat down with her Emperor as she said, "Safe journeys, captains." Kyle bowed as well, the pirates later turning to head back to the docks. When they left the palace, Thomas looked up at the Kanai and asked, "You weren't really trying to date my mom, were you, Captain?" "Of course not," Kyle replied as he glanced over at the boy. "Why would you think that?" "Minus the act I put on involving your mother." "That's exactly why." "Don't worry, she was informed before you arrived, so she'll be fine. Though I won't." "Why is that, Captain?" Kaio noticed Martha standing at the stern of his ship, her arms crossed and her expression enraged. The Kanai shook his head as he went to watch his steps and replied, "You'll soon find out." As predicted, Kaio was yelled out by Martha for using her to trick her son. He was then soon after yelled at for allowing the boy to wield weapons and fight the Emperor of Mongoma. She shouted at the captain for several minutes, even touching back on the kitty subject, yet eventually calmed herself and let the two captains take hold of their ships to sail off. They motioned to set anchor at Houndaño, Kaio's birth grounds, to pay their respects to his own mother and father. However, halfway to his destination, his crew encountered a large black ship that motioned to intercept. Not long after they noticed it, the ship's crew raised its colors to be that of a pirate vessel. Yet even when Kaio and Thomas raised their flags, a warning shot was given out to halt both the Wild One and the Andromeda by the unknown pirate ship. As the vessels drew close enough for combat, Kaio recognized the ship and knew immediately who was commanding it. The ship that was to stand off with both the Wild One and the Andromeda was the very elusive Ecuador, a powerful and fast vessel that no one has ever been able to so much as scratch, be it in combat or otherwise. This ship was controlled by none other than the second most notorious pirate in the vast sea, Captain Brunhilde, the Black Cat. This concludes the reading of Chapter 8. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you've liked what you've seen and heard, be sure to check out my other two novels, Laura the Endowment and Ryu the Demon Slayer. Link will be in the description below. Other than that, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you again next week, reading Chapter 9.